Hi guys, good afternoon. It is 12:30, 19th of August. Relatively quiet, bit of data out for the remainder of the day. Probably most notably before the European close, we've got the oil inventories, 3:30 UK time before the 7 p.m. UK time for the Fed minutes, which will be worth keeping an eye on. The S&P is slowly making its way up to that all-time high. Not much has really happened over the last couple of days, newsworthy anyway, and we are in full swing on the summer. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we do get that test. Do we reject it? Do we get a false break, or do we push on? I think from a personal point of view that the bulls will still be happy as long as we stay above 3,300, which is basically 100 points lower than where we are. Maybe that would be where the correction would come to if we are to get a bit of a dip before the election and then another push. We'll see. The pound, obviously a great day yesterday, just coming under a bit of pressure this morning. After a strong day, it's no surprise. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens really as we come back to test the double top. You'd imagine that will happen, and it's going to be an important zone coming in around 131.75. It's not highly unlikely. I should say it's likely that is going to happen at some point. That's the key line in the sand that I'll be keeping a watch on. The line in the sand for the week, as you know, this was that previous one. This is still an area where the bulls will feel comfortable getting in again, in my opinion. The euro, of course, pushed higher yesterday, and that double top that we had is almost being tested today. So keep a watch on that coming in on the futures, just above the 119 handle, 119.20. That will be obviously an important one. But yeah, good push yesterday. We did come back to test it around 4 o'clock. That acted as a support, and again this morning on the pivot for a push to the upside. Maybe just worth having this trend line, albeit has had a false break. But maybe as the volume picks up, if it picks up into the afternoon, we can see another push to the downside. Probably worth having on a similar trend line. Something's got to give. Is it going to be below starting on the 12th of this month, or is it going to be above starting from yesterday's high where the move happens? We'll have to wait and see, of course, for that. Gold pushed higher yesterday, came into a bit of resistance. We know this is the sort of the line in the sand that we talked about from yesterday, those sort of support points before we dropped down Tuesday last week. The 11th was Tuesday, yes. So first test of that, bit of support, you'd imagine, of resistance, and now we're going to come back and potentially test the line in the sand now to the downside, 1974. Decision time, above or below. You'd be comfortable selling below, I would say. God, didn't mean to do that. Whereas you'd be more comfortable buying above. So yeah, I imagine that will be how people are sort of looking at this going forward. Maybe worth having that trend line on as well, which could break at a similar kind of time. Let's have a quick look over at oil, obviously ahead of the data later this afternoon. Not too much going on. It hasn't really been moving too much anyway, has it, over the last couple of weeks? Bit of a trend line on here. I think it's worth having on. You can see it's got the free test. The market's looking at it, so I'm going to look at it as well. Forming a nice resistance zone from yesterday's highs down to some of those highs that we had back on the 11th as well. Decision time, you would imagine, maybe above the R1 on that sort of hourly close could be the option, or the breakdown, something like that. I still think there's room to the upside though, so it could be a buy the dip is still a possible option, and the lows of the 11th and 10th could be that particular trade. Anyway guys, hope all is well. We'll catch you later on. We are live on YouTube later, Amplify Trading YouTube page from 6:30 to cover the minutes and any Q&As that you guys have.